This is the board meeting of the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners for October 16th. Welcome everyone that's here. We got kind of a long agenda today, and anticipating we may finish some things after lunch, but we'll see how we do. Would you please join in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the next item on the agenda is citizen input, and we do have a request for input from Rondo. So if you want to come up, and you have 3 minutes to share your comments.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to introduce you Brad Donner. He's lived on our streets for the past, well, he's an Oregon resident and native. He died a couple weeks ago. He's a friend of mine. Just to introduce you to Brad. I've asked you to think about some homeless solutions this last few weeks, and specifically today I'd like to ask you to consider winter homeless solutions. I know it's on your mind. I know that you care. I know that you do. He's the third homeless Central Oregon native that I know that have died this month, and there will be many more this winter, as we know. The last couple week cycles, we've had 2 or 3 days in a row of low 20 temperature. I know a lot of people who can't barely make it to their car from their house without complaining about the cold, and they'd be right. Thing is, this is life and death, literally, for people who have grown up here, people who are residents and who are our family, our children, our neighbors. So I would like for you to re-engage and very specifically consider what these solutions would be for your children today. Riding around on my bicycle this morning, honestly, Brad's a guy who actually politically you guys would agree with more than me, and we disagreed on Facebook almost every day. But this guy had a sense of humor, and he loved Bend, and he loved Deschutes County. And I know he respected you. So I'm going to ask that you consider what the solution is going to be before we read about the first freezing death. I have solutions. This nation has solutions. Thank you for considering them.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Is there anyone else that's here that wanted to give citizen input? Doesn't look like it, so we'll move on. The next item is the consent agenda, which we don't have any items today, so we'll move on to our action items. And the first is the consideration of chair signature of document number 2019-763, Smoke Management Community Resource Plan.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Ed Keith, County Forester. You likely recall I was here back at the end of March with a community response plan that you approved. So this tiers back to the state revising the smoke management rules for prescribed fire. And with that revision, there's a few key things in there. One was a call for communities that experience smoke from prescribed fires to come up with a community response plan. And that plan was outlined, with the idea of providing information to the community of when and where they might expect smoke, potential plans for how you protect populations, particularly populations that are vulnerable to smoke. And with that community response plan, if it should be approved by the state, you are actually then potentially exempt from one of the 2 air quality standards. in the smoke management plan. So there are two sets of standards. One is a 1-hour standard, and one is a 24-hour standard. The 1-hour standard makes it hard to meet if you are burning close to the actual monitoring station. Our experience has been that when we burn close to town, particularly on the west side of town, even if we burn during a time that most of the smoke leaves the airshed at night, the smoldering fuels that smoke settles into town and around that air quality monitor. So we've had a number of intrusions over the past years, and in wanting to complete this, prescribed fires to make the community safer in these areas, we're pursuing this 1-hour exemption as part of this community response plan process. So you approved the plan. It went to the state, and the Oregon Department of Forestry and Department of Environmental Quality are the two agencies that look at that and either approve or deny. They actually didn't technically do either. They asked us for more detail, so they didn't outright deny us, but they asked us to add in more detail to the plan. So we've been working on those details. I could outline a few of those. One was they asked for more information on how we are actually reaching vulnerable populations. So working with the Health Services Department, we added some more detail in regards especially to them having a direct connection to their health alert network, and so those details are described in there as far as it's a network of health providers in the community that has direct contact with those vulnerable populations. So the idea is that we use them as a conduit to make sure that those vulnerable populations are getting the information in regards to how they can protect themselves from smoke when it might happen, where they can find that information, those sorts of things.
So on that addition, or is that on the stuff on the information on page 10, which is under the topic, a means of communication notification?
Correct. The plan page 10, or I think it's the packet page 15, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yes.
where it talks about, so you basically added paragraphs or sentences or whatever.
We did, we added, and those are kind of scattered out depending on how the plan was organized to best fit in with the flow of the document, but that particular one was added on page 10. Towards the bottom of that same page, we also added that we had been in contact with the Health Services Department specifically had been in contact with this Central Oregon Access and Functional Needs Work Group as well. That was another concern that was brought up, and so we added that detail in as well. There was also a question on potentially providing cleaner air spaces. That detail was added on page 12. It's been our experience that the smoke intrusions, if they happen, are relatively short in duration and typically tend to be overnight. So it hasn't been the case that we've anticipated actually using clean air spaces, but they still asked us to add that in, that we would either potentially be looking at those. We've actually identified those more in terms from a wildfire perspective, where wildfire smoke might last a longer period of time, and people might need to that don't otherwise have access to a clean air space. And so the Health Department has actually received a grant and has actually worked with a few different locations to identify those cleaner air spaces. We haven't listed those in there because those could potentially move around from place to place, and so those would be released at the time, like a media release if there's a prolonged smoke exposure going on. Again, not necessarily something that I'd expect that we would use for prescribed fire. It would something would have had to gone wrong. Usually, our smoke intrusions have been really pretty short in duration, but it's a detail that we did add in. They also.
I have a question about that. So with going from the 1-hour standard to the 24-hour standard, is there, do you anticipate that prescribed burns would be different than they have been in the past?
I don't anticipate them to be dramatically different. I anticipate that there may be some more flexibility in potentially additional days that we could be burning. I don't anticipate that the smoke would be, dramatically
Lasting
more intense
longer.
or lasting longer. As I'd mentioned, leading up to these rule revisions for the last 5 years or so, actually, Bend has had the lion's share of violations in the state. So it's more bringing us in line with trying to avoid having those violations. And potentially allowing either, a little bit more acreage being burned. So, from the efficiency standpoint, we actually met with the Oregon Department of Forestry and DEQ this spring to talk about this, and we were discussing a particular prescribed burn that happened to be going on that day. The question was raised of, there's 4 prescribed burn units all in the same area. They were doing one of those. You could potentially do multiple units in one day at essentially the same cost, and so you could potentially add a little bit more acreage, which corresponds to the amount of tons that are consumed. From a community's perspective, I don't see this as being like a dramatic difference. I'd say characterize it more as a subtle difference, but we'll see moving forward.
And the fire they had going yesterday, Chevron Park, how big was that?
I believe it was 69 acres,
Okay.
so on the smaller side of
So it was on the
typical-sized
smaller
units.
side then?
Yeah.
Because, you looked at the smoke and then I went, oh no, prescribed. So.
Yeah, pretty light. And they had done a lot of fuels treatment, as it is the case with most of our prescribed fires, a lot of fuels treatment, trying to reduce the amount of fuels that are actually consumed in that fire to begin with, so those smoke emissions can be minimized is one of those key things as well. One of the other details that they asked is to provide a little bit more detail on who was actually responsible for each phase of kind of initiation of communication and what those communication tools looked like. So there's some detail added on, particularly in the appendix, that provide a few different example press releases, a protocol for how people can find essentially an interactive map, and how that map is maintained, so people can actually look at that map and see the exact boundaries of each unit that's planned or in progress or completed for that year. Most of the communication is initiated by the Forest Service, because that's the primary agency that's actually doing the burning, so they know when they plan to burn, they know who's going to be doing it, and the timing and all those sorts of things. If they're, in the case of a more prolonged smoke incident, there is a role for our Health Services Department. We have kind of a stock press release about what community members might be able to do to mitigate from and protect themselves from a prolonged smoke incident. And one of those examples in the appendix as well. That's kind of a high-level review of some of the details that we've added. It didn't really, the details we've added really didn't change. The other thing that we did add on is a little bit more history. So they were actually, the 2 agencies were actually quite surprised that we submitted our community response plan this same month that the rules went into effect. The reason we were able to do that is because we were watching this process go on for a matter of 18 months or so, and knew that these rules were already going to be in there. We had formed a group that we've called our kind of smoke and public health group, and that group had been talking about the things that went into this plan well in advance of the rules being finalized. So we did add in a little bit of that process of how that group formed, the history behind it, that they had been working together for a year. We were already incorporating health messages into the Forest Service press releases around prescribed fire. So we added that in there as well.
Well, that was, I mean, it wasn't really surprising that we were going to use it. We were one of the ones that pushing for it, probably the strongest of any of the communities, and it provided the background and the information of why we needed it, so
Yeah.
it probably weren't.
I don't think it was a
Too
surprise that we
surprising.
were going to request an exemption. I think it was just a surprise that we had a really quick turnaround to get that in.
They thought they'd get the rule approved, and then they'd,
It might wait
5
for
months, 6 months or something.
9 months to, yeah.
How about
to-
2 years?
to hear from communities. And so, and there has been other interest. I think, I've heard from people in Lakeview, Klamath Falls, Baker City, LeGrand, Ashland, Medford areas, places that are commonly doing prescribed fire, all kind of waiting to see what one of these looks like and plan to follow and use this as a template. So there is other interest in there, but ours is, we happen to be kind of leading the charge, so
Well, congratulations.
thank you.
Well, yeah,
So it says it was been reviewed by Department of Forestry and Environmental Quality, but there's no approvals yet.
Correct, so.
Kind of in partnership, looks like we're getting there.
Exactly, to try to avoid any more kind of back and forth, you approve a version, and they ask us for another paragraph of detail. This has been sent to Department of Environmental Quality and Department of Forestry. They have met, reviewed what's in the plan, and essentially have told me that this is an approvable plan. And so, prior to formally submitting it for their approval, the rule does require that the city council, in coordination with the Board of County Commissioners, both, indicate that they've reviewed and approved of the plan as written.
Well, and on Friday, we did the Oregon Forest Resource Institute board tour with the collaborative, and it was explained very clearly. During the day, the heat and the smoke rises, and then at night, it'll just work its way back down and condense at the river kind of basin in the area. So it's just, that's at the point that maybe that intrusion will happen, even though the fire has been going all day.
Sure.
So the scenario, and that's good for people to understand, that's what the scenario is here. Hopefully we're getting to a point where that second burn or the burn a little bit farther away, we're even going to see less and less of these intrusions themselves.
Right, and we were able to actually add in, I think the final appendix in here, maybe Appendix D, some information on a prescribed burn that actually went on this spring that was a re-entry 5 years after the first entry, and it was estimated to be somewhere in the order of about 25% of the emissions of the first burn. So these first burns are particularly challenging, but I would say also, particularly important to get done for kind of a line of defense around the populated areas.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was another thing that was mentioned on the tour, was about the difference between the first burn and the second burn, and how much material was burnt and
Sure.
everything else. Good. Any questions, Commissioner Dare, or comments?
No, it was fascinating to know that what the tree that they had analyzed had to burn, whatever, 24 years on average from the 1600s, and then we had that philosophy where we weren't burning any longer. So, we have a lot of tonnage out there
Yes, we do.
that we have to worry about.
Well, as you said, it was, we'd approved the original draft that was submitted, so unless there would be objections to any of the details that were added, it seems like you've made it better. And it seems like we'll probably be a template now for other places that use it. They'll probably look at this, and I was thinking if we really wanted to encourage other counties to do it, when we could take drafts or copies of this to one of our AOC meetings and pass them out.
Certainly.
And say, this is what we're doing to increase prescribed burns. I know it's not used in every county and every forest even, but it looks, I was going through it again, it was interesting to see what's considered vulnerable populations. It's like most of us fit one category or another.
Breathing.
So breathing is for the impacts of smoke, but.
Yeah, and I'd say to any communities that, may look at this as an example, even if they're not actually requesting an exemption from the 1 hour air quality standard. These are just, good practices to inform citizens of how they can protect themselves, and, having a plan in place where your health experts are talking to your prescribed fire people, and there's, some dialogue there and some acknowledgement that even if people are supportive of prescribed fire, we still do need to protect the population from smoke exposure as much as we can. And so, these are just, I think, good common sense things that we should be doing in services to the citizens.
Good. What, it's a little off subject, but the burn that went on yesterday had good coverage with the news. It was a big story, at least on KTVZ last night. Were people invited to go to that, or how did people, because I'd heard about it on Friday, but I didn't realize it was going to be yesterday.
Yeah. Yes, there was. We've been trying to, where we can. This was a second time, and I didn't have direct involvement in yesterday's burn, but in cooperation yesterday with the Bend Parks and Recreation District, who owns the land that was burned, they offered a tour, essentially trying to get people out to realize it's not, necessarily burning up the whole forest, what a real prescribed fire looks like, kind of the careful, thoughtful way that fire is introduced, starting with a test fire, lighting specific areas in a specific pattern, and just trying to illustrate that to the public so they have a little bit better understanding of what actually goes on out there. So we're trying to do that when we can. It's hard sometimes because sometimes the decision to burn is the day before, and people's schedules, of course, are juggled around. But as best we can, we're going to try to use that opportunity to try to offer public tours on prescribed fires that are accessible, like the one at Shevlin Park was relatively accessible, just to get people to better understand. If you go out and see it, you really might resonate with you a little bit more than
Well, and the
looking at it
difference
from
between
afar.
that raging forest fire you might see on the news in California taking out houses 100 miles an hour, and the thoughtful conditions that this is ignited and managed by, people need to have that vision in their head. It's very different.
Well, they just had a prescribed burn, though, in Tahoe get away. So, yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, I just saw that the other day. So, yeah, it's still happening in California when it shouldn't be.
One of the things that was interesting on the tour was that slab that Pete Calgary had that you were mentioning with
Right. From the
with all those burns. And did you get a chance to look at it too? Yeah. So burns going back all the way to 1600. And so I happened to be sitting by him on the bus and asked him about his study. They'd gone out for 2 summers with 5 people cutting slabs out of stumps, and they got 1,200 slabs. And so it wasn't just like we went out and found a stump that showed these burns. And so they mapped out apparently these fires, and it was before I was a commissioner. So I guess he has a presentation on this so he can map out the fires in the west of Bend area. Because I've always been a little bit skeptical, to be honest, when people say, oh, it burned all the time and this was the way it was. And I was like, well, that sounds good as a way to get more prescribed burns, but that's the first time I've ever really seen the facts.
The facts.
And
It was
The fact that he went to Yale.
the
One
forestry.
forestry
Well,
school.
that was a positive thing, yeah.
Yes.
People don't know that they have a great forestry school.
It was the first one in the nation.
Yeah.
quite an extensive study with the idea of having that kind of local knowledge of what actually happened in this forest, not
Yeah.
just forest theoretically, and that has really helped support those the management that's going on, not just the prescribed fire, but the need for openings, variable ages, all the things that fire created. So that study has been very helpful in kind of enhancing local knowledge in regards to managing the forest.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Any other comments or?
I guess, yeah, one question is, when this thing is accepted, acknowledged, and approved, is that a change, is there a change coming, or we're basically working under these rules already, and then Would this expand just that little bit more of?
We are working under the newly revised rules, with except that, like this spring, if this plan would have been in place, the intrusion that we had wouldn't have actually been a violation. And so, looking at that intrusion, we're kind of capped at that acreage right now. Don't burn over that, maybe burn a little bit less than what that acreage was with the violation we had this spring, or the intrusion that we had this spring. So that would, but it didn't exceed the 24-hour standard, and so we'd be good to do that larger instead of that larger, smaller. So yes, so slightly.
For next spring?
Right, yep.
Good, okay.
Let's seek a motion then to approve this.
I move we approve chair signature of document number 2019-763, the Smoke Management Community Response Plan.
And I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Thanks, Ed, for bringing this in and going through it with us. And
Thank you, Ed. It was.
The city council is set to review this at their upcoming meeting. I think it's November 6th, and then we'll forward it on to the state from there. So, thank you.
great, thanks. Our next item on the agenda is an update from Community Solutions in Central Oregon.
Good morning, Commissioners. I will introduce this item. This morning we have Gary Winterstein, the Executive Director of Community Solutions of Central Oregon, which is formerly Central Oregon Mediation. Gary has a short presentation. Community Solutions of Central Oregon is a county service partner providing mediation services for Justice Court, and they are also the recipient of State of Oregon Community Dispute Resolution dollars, which come through Deschutes County to Community Solutions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gary.
All right. Good morning.
Morning, Gary.
How are you? I think I've met some of you. Ms. Adair, I haven't met you. How are you? Morning. Council, how are you, sir? I appreciated that last presentation. My wife and I just moved up here several years ago, about 5 years ago. She's a native coastal Californian. So she is now the new designated authority on forest management. She's fascinated by it. She uses terms like ladder fuel and prescribed burn. I walked in the house yesterday because I live just past Shevlin, up in the Saddleback area. And as soon as I saw her in the kitchen, she turned around and said two words to me: prescribed burn. Thanks, honey. That's great. So she's dialed in. She's fascinated by it. And she's an
advocate for it.
Absolutely. She now understands that it's okay to go to the forest and cut your own Christmas tree with a permit, by the way. So, yeah.
Well, is she talking yet in all the abbreviations? Because that's
Not yet. She'll get to the acronyms.
There's all this, yeah, it's the acronyms. That's the next level of the
Yeah.
experts. They always
Shortcuts.
yeah.
Yeah.
Since we don't have the Santa Ana's, or I don't know where she was on the coast.
Yeah, Encinitas. So, she knows October is kind of a very bad month.
October, November, December. yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
All of them.
Well, thanks for making some time on the agenda for me today. My role here today, I think, is really to give you an update about the dispute resolution services we provide, give you a couple updates on what's on our burner, our plate, so to speak, and then something kind of rare. I've only come to the commissioners' forums a few times, but we have one situation that has to do with funding, so I'll address that at the conclusion of my remarks. So if you can see these slides, is that...
Copies, and then we do have the copies, and then
Oh, you have a paper copy.
Yeah, but it usually,
Oh, okay.
But there is a PowerPoint because she was getting it.
yes.
Right. Okay, so you're going to cue that up, or? Oh. Oh, you're looking at
There
that
you
screen.
go.
Wow, that's, okay. Very good. Okay.
Secret is some of us can't actually read it from where we're sitting.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
turning around's fine. That's okay. I'll just use these to cue my comments. Hey, that little slogan line on the bottom of that slide is basically what we do. We help people have difficult conversations, and bottom line is wherever the people are, that's where the conflict is. And we're kind of like plumbers. You don't really call us unless you need us. And sometimes it's kind of a time-sensitive emergency. So that said, This is the things that I'll discuss briefly. A few highlights, like I mentioned, some impacts. Very quick overview of our services and programs. I'll talk specifically about the Justice Court, and that's a great program for us. And I think it's well received by the Justice of the Peace up there in Redmond. We'll talk about some program development things that we have going on. It's good to know about at the commissioner's level. And lastly, this funding, restoration, and support that I'm going to talk about. On slide 3 there, talking about the highlights, you know, we are just part of a network of currently 15 dispute resolution centers around the state. So bottom line is we were formed in '97, redesignated a nonprofit form as Central Oregon Mediation, which remains our bread and butter service. Okay, first public grant the year after. Initial contracts for services with counties and cities began in 2004, kind of diversifying our income stream. And when I first arrived in 15, we kind of adopted this diversification strategy because there's much more to dispute resolution than just mediation. Okay. So that said, that's the highlights. Impacts. You know, I take a collective look at our first 21 years, and it's pretty clear we're reaching towards the 4,600 case volume, and that is a variety of cases. Everywhere, everything from a court case to a divorce case to a foreclosure, you name it, a neighbor dispute. If you look at our archive, that's quite an amount of work. Right now we average, as of last calendar year, 2018, about 225 cases annually. I would mention that in 2019, you know, about half of that caseload was through the county justice court. So it is a significant part of our work. Overall, you know, if we combined all of the success rates, we got about a 600 batting average. That's not bad if you play baseball, but about 60%, 6 in 10 parties that come for mediation specifically, we can get them to agreement.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe it's obvious to everybody else, but when you say half of the annual cases are justice court, are those all small claims, or are there?
Well, in justice court, yes, it's small claims. I have a chart in here that gives you a little bit of overview on the types of cases. It's actually surprising the variety of disputes people have that they bring to small claims. And it might seem like it's about a number, $10,000 cap at justice court, a little bit different at circuit court, but I'll talk to that. Quite a lot of volunteers. If there is a private mediator or, you know, someone working in the courts related to the courts in a mediation program, it's a fair chance that they have at some point in their early career in training for mediation specifically have come through our organization. We provide an annual basic mediation training course, and we train about 16 to 20 new mediators a year. And they can mediate anywhere. Doesn't mean they have to mediate with us. They can go over to the circuit court, go into private practice, which is quite common. So right now I'm running at about 35 volunteers, and it's like any organization. You know, you got your folks, your guys and gals that do yeoman's work. So there's about a dozen that do the heavy lifting. Staff and board, just 2 and 6 right now. We're just bringing on a new board member on Friday, so that'll grow us to 7, which is good. It's a healthy number for a small nonprofit. How about $100K in annual income? That's of last fiscal year. You know, we're in a lot of ways, we're like a small business. Grants, which we'll talk about in a second, they really account for maybe 24% of our income. So contracts, fees for service, we have a corporate contract, we have 2 state contracts. So, you know, it's pretty diverse for us. We do have, like a lot of nonprofits, that charge fee for service on some casework. We do have the ability, like everybody, to have the sliding scale, and I probably waive about $5,000 in fees annually. I'll tell you a little bit about those fees when we get to a later chart. And this last bullet is a little cryptic, but I'll make it very simple. We did a little case sample on 3 specific cases recently that we conducted this year. One had to do with elder care. One was a dissolution of marriage, a divorce. And the third was a family business dispute. And the bottom line, in order to give those parties initial services, 2 hours of initial services, with us, $300 a case. So that's $900 total. Now what we did is we took a comparative cost, comparison. If those individuals in those 3 specific cases had gone on and got retainers for certain types of attorneys, and those attorneys had billed hourly and then also filed in circuit court, the initial cost outlay is quite different, about $9,600, and that's just the initial fees. So this is a very cost-effective alternative to litigation in some cases. Okay, very, very cost-efficient. The services is pretty simple. Yeah.
Both parties usually don't have lawyers involved. I mean, this is.
You know what? You would think that. Not at all. We deal with attorneys every day. Every day. Certainly in court, although in small claims you can't have an attorney represent unless the justice go ahead. He has to pre-approve that. And some clients who can't physically appear, they can have their counsel represent them. But we have attorneys present. Yeah, we have attorneys present in all our foreclosure work. Sometimes in our divorce cases, they'll bring counsel with them. So it's not uncommon at all. We even have, Tony, 7 attorneys that do mediation work with us. So yeah. The 3 signature services, 2-party, which is 90% of the time, but sometimes you get 3 or more parties in mediation. That's a little bit like a wrestling match. It's a little bit different tactics for the mediator. Facilitation, of course, is quite different, and that can be, I think these are the 3 primary areas in which we find ourselves 3-4 times a year actually facilitating. Board governance is big with a lot of small nonprofits trying to figure it out as they go. So we help facilitate some difficult policy discussions with them. Strategic planning is a big one. Community issues, everything from noise to parking to you name it. And usually if we have a referral on that, it comes from the City of Bend. Okay, and that can include neighborhood associations, businesses. So that is very challenging. A good example would be last year we had a community issue and there were 12 stakeholders at the table. So, but I will say, even though mediation skills are quite useful in facilitating a public forum, for example, we found out that every mediator is not necessarily a good facilitator. You got to have the skin for that. So, and the last is some special projects. Give you a good example. Our recent facilitation case where, hey, we're teaming up with the Bend Genealogical Society. You know, they want a new strategy. They got to figure it out. And they have over 100 volunteers. So, you know, that's a homegrown. We kind of like those projects. And then on the education side, of course, we do a lot of internal training especially with, continuing ed for mediators. That's monthly, quarterly, and annually in some of our programs. But we do take conflict resolution on the road, so to speak. So we do quarterly workshops. This year, we've exclusively been focused on manufactured communities, mobile home parks. And we're starting this fiscal year with Jefferson County. So at the end of the month, we have a conflict management workshop up at City Hall there for those 11 home parks in that small county. And then internships. We've kind of shifted gears there. We have had graduate and and undergrad interns before, but now we're looking even at the community college level. And we're actually teaming with the communications department, talking right now about how to, in some of their courses, get panels of mediators to answer questions from some of the students in classes like listening and conflict resolution. So it's a good partnership there. So those are our signature services. If I could say, we have 4 programs. These are the 4 buckets we carry water in, basically. The Justice Court, as you know, small claims. If we, and next slide talks to that specifically, but the batting average for fiscal year 19 was right about 500, 50-50, which is a little lower than the last 2 previous years, 65%, 62%. Okay? But that's county funded generously through a service partner agreement with the county, and we appreciate that. Essentially, the funds through that contract, maybe not in name, but they're essentially a matching contribution to what we receive through state funding, okay, which is about, proportionally for Deschutes County is right about $42,000. So the Justice Court is our almost exclusively sole focus. But I would mention, under the contract with the county, we do occasionally take referrals over primarily from code enforcement. And that can be everything from, farmer, rancher, hemp grower disputes, to homelessness. So not a big case volume. You're talking, they might punt 3 or 4 cases, a year, but that can be included in the umbrella of that contract. Foreclosures. When I arrived 5 years ago, we had quite a heavy pace still of foreclosures, and what we do is we mediate between the homeowner in trouble. They bring an advocate, a housing counselor, mostly provided by Neighbor Impact, but others around the state, and the lender. And of course, the lender has both their corporate counsel and their local counsel. So again, attorneys are in the room with us quite a bit. But I would say when I arrived, we probably mediated about 15 foreclosure cases a month. Okay, the volume of that is obviously quite down regionally. Right now, we handle about 8 a month. Projection from the state is that'll be about a steady plateau for the next 2 years. Okay, and so that is through a state-funded contract with a corporation that pays us directly for that casework. Last year, the success rate was only about 45%. So when you have a foreclosure case that is a success, that means not necessarily they get to keep their home, but they can work with the lender on how they leave the home, okay? Whether that's a deed in lieu or it's a short sale. But the majority of agreements, 49-50% last year, were loan modifications, okay? And in very few instances will you have a homeowner in trouble in foreclosure who can pay the reinstatement amount, okay? They fall behind for a number of reasons, mostly hardships. So the Neighbor Impact Housing Counselors provide a great service, and they're at the table as well to try to get the homeowners plugged in to federal assistance. That third bucket, community support, it's like the all other bucket, okay? Families, neighbors, business cases, a variety of funding streams for that, including fees for service, direct fees for service. Folks that fall into that category generally have a very high need, individually and collectively, to somehow retain a relationship. Okay, it's family, a business partner, in some way, even neighbors. So they are more predisposed coming to the table to want to get an agreement. Unlike court, where it's very adversarial, or in a lot of cases in foreclosures. So that's why you see that higher success rate. Okay, and last one is the manufactured communities or mobile home parks. you know, the largest disputes there are between the tenant and the park manager. Okay. Yes, there are tenant to tenant or neighbor disputes. And occasionally, 2-3 times a year, we will get an owner involved in a dispute at a home park. But these are very insular. It's close quarters living, just like apartment complexes. So it's very hard to get them to the table. So those workshops that I mentioned, the target audience is park managers, okay? They're the critical mass. And again, that's only just over 50% success rate. So all told, that's how you get, you know, our overall success rate throughout the region. Now, on the Justice Court slide, this is pretrial mediation service. And we spend whatever time we need every Tuesday up there in Redmond, great facilities, to take people literally off the docket. That's the goal. We have 13 active mediators that they kind of focus, kind of like water to its own level. They prefer to do court work. We have a few that prefer to do divorces. I don't know why, but you know, they seem to find their own interest in mediation, especially. We have a retired business exec who is just fascinated by mobile home parks, and those are his baby. So everybody has their own niche. We provide our mediators annual and monthly refresher training for that court work specifically. Okay, these are 1-hour refreshers on skills and agreement writing, and also the annual training is a requirement in order for our mediators to continue to do work up at the court. Justice of the Peace, Judge Fadley, he's very good to us. He hosts us for an annual lunch, and we talk about issues. He talks about trends he sees in agreements. We talk about success rate. He answers questions directly about the court practices from the mediators. It's a great relationship, so we're pretty happy to provide the service and get the support. This year, all of our mediators are now laptop mobile printer equipped. We used to hand write them out. That's kind of a grab bag with some mediators. So everything is quite professional looking, and the judge gave us some input on a couple things in the format for the new agreements. So that's great. Last year we went a little bit over the caseload cap, which traditionally has been about 100 for the last few years. Went up to about 128, thanks to Eric and the others that worked with us on exceeding that limit because the court needed it. And like anything, there's seasonal spikes. Okay, we're coming in the downtime. November, December, very slow at the Justice Court. Yeah, wait till the spring hits. Okay, we've had spikes of 18 up to 22 cases a month at Justice Court at certain times of the year. So we're expecting that in fiscal year 2020. So more than 260 people, plaintiffs and defendants, really were taken off the docket, so to speak. And that frees up the court to take on their most difficult cases. Most common case types, you see them there. No surprises probably to some of you. The surprise for the mediator is that there's such variety up there. That really draws the mediators because it's a challenge. I had a case yesterday and took 4 hours. Sometimes a mediator will show up and they'll be done in 30 minutes, or they'll be up there 4 hours. The big difference, I'm sure you know, between pretrial and going to court, even if it's small claims, is this: time. We give those plaintiffs and defendants whatever time they need to work it out, because when they get in front of the Justice of the Peace, they don't get 4 hours to discuss things, okay?
Television.
Exactly. He's on a time hack, and he has to make a decision. So I think it's a good win when we have a 4-hour case, because if they went to trial, as you know, when you go to trial, somebody wins, somebody loses. So those are the types of cases we see. Even civil matters. Yeah.
So I'm just processing, so that annual lunch with the judge.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in joining you on that if possible.
Sure.
Because you just talked about the, where he talks about trends or whatever too. That would be an interesting meeting. So, yeah, if it comes around and maybe I
Sure.
can help take a note, just an invitation for.
Absolutely.
one of us, however it might work.
Did you already
But
have the lunch this year?
No, we usually have it in the spring, about April timeframe. So we had it this year, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
So what were the trends? Can you remember what he was saying trends were?
Well, we like to get his perspective on the trends when a case goes to court. They fail to come to agreement and they have to go see him. So he spends, up to an hour on some cases. That's good to know, because when you're in mediation, you can say, hey, you'll get probably less than an hour when you go see the judge. Another trend is there's an uptick in debt collection cases up there. Usually, the debt collection cases take about, I'm going to say 25% of our caseload. So we're very familiar with debt collection as a business, their policies, their procedures, who are some of their major clients. The healthcare providers are putting a lot of people in debt, unfortunately. But 6 and 10, we get an agreement. So that can be a longer-term payment plan as opposed to getting their pay garnished.
I just had a question.
So, sure.
On your sheet, Resolution Oregon, you don't cover 10 counties.
That's right. That's
Why?
right.
Can you-
Yeah. Funding. We're pretty thin spread. That handout I gave up here has a map on it. Hi, Janice. Has a map on it. And, as I said, dispute is really where the center of gravity, the people are. So you see the valley, heavy concentration. But on the eastern part of the state, usually if there's a dispute in Burns or down in Lakeview or in Christmas Valley, guess who they call? They call our center. So about 6 times a year, we go out to the frontier, literally, and handle a dispute. Can be something as simple as an off-grid living dispute to tribal court out in Burns Paiute. We handle about 2 of those a year. Not a huge volume, but it's proportionate to where the people live. Doesn't mean they shouldn't have access to the service. Yeah.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. And so that comes into play when, we were designed and funded to support not just Deschutes County, but Crook and Jefferson as well. So with that said, this slide are the four programs that, we're pushing forward. Conflict coaching, think of it like this.
Gary?
Yep.
I want to just interrupt you. Well, this is interesting. We're getting a lot. But
Got it.
Second first item on our agenda, so if we could finish up in the next 10 minutes or so, that.
You bet. Finish in 5. Okay. Conflict coaching basically is dispute resolution for one. It's like a TV dinner. So when we can't get both parties to the table, we bring the other person into coaching and help them devise a strategy to cope with the issues that they're facing. These other things are self-explanatory. I would mention on the third bullet, ag mediation. We have 3 certified, USDA certified ag mediators. So it doesn't get a lot of volume, and we need to do better outreach to Crook and Jefferson especially. And that goes from everything from farmers, ranchers, and the neighbors that live in close proximity. Okay, so this slide right here gets to the matter. For us, we've been in business 21 years, and that state funding is pretty important. I would say to you that there are 5 centers in the state where this is exclusively their funding. So if it's reduced, especially for the rural, some of the very rural centers that provide services, they're in a much bigger bind than us, okay? That is the only show of income in town. But overall, the legislative session last year, there was a 20% reduction statewide for dispute resolution services. So that's about a $2.5 million state funded. That's, dispersed to all the centers. And our take on that is, about $52K. Okay? So that's been reduced. Don't want to get into why it was reduced. the effort is to hopefully get that restored, because there are some impacts, and in some centers much bigger than ours. We're targeting the upcoming short session, February, March. There are negative impacts to even a 20% reduction on our scale, okay? But it varies by county, and certain services would have to be reduced. Pointedly, Deschutes County, we're diversified enough where you wouldn't even notice. It's the outlying counties that are going to take a hit, Jefferson and Crook. But that reduction for us is about $10,400, okay? And either through fees for service, additional contracts, maybe an additional grant, I can make that up. The hardest hit are the outlying counties, and what I mean there is primarily when we provide community support casework to Crook and Jefferson County clients. These are family, business, neighbor disputes. And 9 times out of 10, it's a different demographic, we either reduce or we waive the fee. Okay? It's nowhere near the case volume in and around Deschutes County, obviously. But that would be the impact. I would pretty much have to eliminate, and we're not talking a large caseload. We're talking maybe 12 to 15 cases per county per year, just because, the population. But that would be the biggest impact in a loss of that. A lesser impact, hey, I have to delay the size and scope of an upcoming hire in 2020. Okay? So that said, this is what the strategy, which was been devised by the University of Oregon. Now, U of O, they are the grant administrator for the state money. Okay, so they're doing the allocation and to the different centers. So, their state affairs office is kind of taking the lead on this in helping the grant administrator and these centers, mine included, trying to resurrect this funding. So what we're doing is we're going to send over a letter of support. I'll send that over through Eric. You can take a look at it. Some key points on impacts were suggested by the State Affairs Office. I'll plug in some more meaningful impacts at the local level, and I'll send that letter over by Friday. You can take a look at it. The ideal situation statewide is that all the directors are asking their commissioners for support in the form of a letter, short, sweet, and to the point. We know about the funding loss. These services are important in our county and outlying areas. These are the impacts. We need your support. And this would go directly to the committee on the Ways and Means. And the co-chairs really are the target. So that's the letter that we send over would be addressed to the co-chairs. We're asking that letter, if you're comfortable with it, is to sign on to it and go ahead and send it to the 3 co-chairs, and that would be Senator Johnson, Senator Steiner Hayward, and Rep. Rayfield. So they're the 3 co-chairs. Now, on a different approach, 2 state senators have agreed to kind of champion this restoration, and that's Rep. Marsh and Rep. Kenny Goyer. So they're going to be writing a Dear Colleague letter. Now that's internal to the legislature. They'll send it themselves to all the reps around the state, and they're going to be asking them to sign on as well to a separate letter. So that said, there's a few things to consider. I have to get in front of the other commissioners in the other counties as well. It's a little bit different conversation because there's potentially greater impact out there. But that's it in general. Again, we're into our 22nd year. Dispute countywide and regionally is always going to be relevant. It's always going to be out there. And there's no shortage of disputes, I can tell you that, whether it's small private disputes or up at the community levels. So with that, again, thanks for having me, put me on the agenda. Hope I can get you back on track time-wise. Any questions, any at all, be happy to field them.
I'll just acknowledge support, getting the word out. The short session would be for this kind. I do support the fact that this discussion needs to happen in the short session. Restoring funding to traditional levels or even a little bit more would be appropriate, it seems, in the big picture. The value of that, one of the items, conflict coaching. If you can't get both parties at the table, at least you get one party up to speed on what conflict coaching
Yeah.
or conflict resolution looks like. I mean, as a, I'm just thinking from a young adult to an adult, when you buy a house and you get married and you have neighbor conflict or whatever this might be, everybody needs to go through that process of understanding a direct conflict, understanding your side of it, and then understanding there may be another side to it. So just the education opportunity for our citizens
Yeah.
can be so valuable.
Thanks for that.
And I do want to recognize the fact that we lost Senator Winters during session, and according to all of our conversation on Monday in Salem, her impact on the funding for a lot of justice programs was incredibly significant. People did not have any, were totally caught off guard with the cuts. And that's what they're saying is really she was one of the supreme champions in Salem.
Yeah.
She probably provides the history, when it comes down to that last budget talks at the end of a session. She was able to provide a lot of the history, and she just wasn't available.
Passed
And
away.
I know, and I'm saying
Yeah,
she wasn't
yeah.
there.
Well, the university, who's the grant administrator, was totally taken by surprise on this, so.
Well, it's
Gotcha.
UVille Law School, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I'm an alumni of there, so.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Anyway, it's been interesting since the session. We've kind of had a variety of presentations by different kinds of group, or not group, funded organizations. And some things got a lot of money, and then some things got cut. And it's been interesting as commissioners seeing what the fallout has been. And we don't know why this got cut. It'd be interesting. I mean, a lack of a champion was
Yeah.
what we heard. It was also an issue with why we didn't get another judge, is that the Senator Winters I was told by the Attorney General that she had been a champion for that. So it's
Yeah.
going to be it's interesting for us to figure it out. It'd be interesting to see if they can get more funding because we've been told
Yeah.
that there's zero chance that we could get a judge in the short session. So, but maybe something with this amount of money.
told that.
We were told that at AOC, or I was told that at AOC, on the governance committee. I brought it up on Monday, and both Patrick Singh and Rob Bovett said it was zero chance. So interesting. So that's,
Yeah.
but this champion idea is good to see here. So this has been really interesting. I've never known the whole scope of it either.
Pass those down.
Call me if you have any questions.
Tom, did you have a comments too? Or
Yeah, no, I was, thank you, Commissioners. I was going to just, on behalf of the Justice Court and Judge Fadley, he's mentioned a number of times how appreciative he is of the services that your organization provides. And we've worked hard over the last few years to try and get the Justice Court back to a kind of a break-even point, and simply couldn't do it without your efforts to reduce what's in front of him with a civil claim. So on behalf of our annual budgeting process, your efforts are appreciated as well.
Well, we appreciate the partnership. It's a great team. So, thank you.
Eric, any comments?
No, I don't have any.
Well, thanks for getting this organized. Dave, you're in the legal business. Any comments on mediation and
No,
solving problems out
Call us if you need us, sir.
glad you're out there doing it. Thank you.
I'll work with Gary on getting the letter back next week for board consideration.
Great. Yeah, I think we'll be supportive.
And it sounds like the board is supportive of using the county logo on the letter.
Yes.
That's a great thing.
Thank you.
to do. Thank you for your time.
Have a great day.
Okay, we'll move on. Item number 3 is consideration of board signature and ordinance number 2019-015, clarifying ordinance regarding the marijuana opt-out. And
Morning, Commissioners. Adam Smith, Assistant Legal Counsel. As you know, there's been an unfortunate difference of opinion between Deschutes County and OLCC regarding your intent and your language in the original opt-out language. Unfortunately, certainly our perspective has been that since it is your ordinance and since it was your intent that some other measures should have been sufficient to clarify the meaning of that ordinance. Unfortunately, that has not necessarily been the case. And so this new ordinance, 2019-015, is an attempt to formally clarify that original ordinance, not necessarily alter the language of that ordinance, but just clarifying that intent. It's being presented as a pragmatic solution to ensure that these this class of pending applications, folks who either had already received land use approval from Deschutes County or were at least in the land use approval process, but had not yet received licenses from OLCC, that their license, that OLCC through this ordinance will be able to continue processing those pending license applications as well. I'm happy to answer any questions or to share more, but I'm being sensitive to your time and giving a very brief presentation.
Any questions?
Just an observation, kind of state agencies at this point, so OLCC's observation about their process for these licensing just seems to be a disconnect with the land use system. With these, land use can be contentious, it can be a very formal process, and it's an appealed process. But once somebody gets land use, there's, should be, respect for that approval. So it's just amazing seeing two different state agencies use it in different manners, referring to land use and all the issues we go through there, and then this conclusion that there's some implied statement that we're going to stop a process that was put in motion. So just acknowledging that.
I just wanted to thank Adam for all the work that you've done, and I also wanted to acknowledge Jennifer Kern, who is on the board and who was very helpful. I know we didn't accomplish what we were hoping to do with the conversation with her, but I do appreciate the help she was offering from her position as being a member of their board. So, it wasn't what we intended, and with our initial opt-out vote.
So as you've, I'm not trying to rush every item on the agenda, so whatever time we need is fine. We've already discussed this in a previous session, and for the record or for anybody that's watching or whatever, we'd done the ordinance. We tried to clarify the letter, and they said, no, we need an ordinance clarifying it. So this is there's specific wording in the new ordinance that says we didn't intend to make the opt-out retroactive to people that had already been approved by our land use process, which people had gone to a lot of expense, and there had been a lot of work on those. So that's what this is. There was a good article in the paper today about this whole issue, and I think it pretty well lined it out to the community as well. So that was good. So I guess with that,
Sir, if I may, Commissioner Adair, I appreciate your comments, but of course, with all things related to marijuana, there's never just one of us who are working on this issue. So thank you for, I'm just the face of this particular project, but of course, my colleagues at CDD have been instrumental, and of course, Dave has been working on this issue as well. It's never just one person on these issues.
That's right. And thank all of you for all your work. Now we just have to work on ADUs.
Is this a first and second reading?
That is staff's proposal for the board to adopt this by emergency, first and second reading today, and let's get this thing knocked out as fast as possible, if that's of course the commissioner's desire.
So with that, I'll move approval of first and second reading of ordinance number 2019-015, clarifying ordinance number 2019-014 and declaring an emergency.
I'll second it.
any further comments? Commissioner DeBonne?
By title only.
Right.
By title only.
Yes.
And you support that? Yeah, so, yeah.
So
I was just thinking the next step here is you're going to read it.
Motion to, yeah, before we approve it, it's just for the reading, correct?
Yes,
Twice, the title only. Okay.
yeah. When it's by emergency, it's typically implied that it's by title only.
Okay, yeah,
Clarify that, certainly.
So Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
The chair votes yes. So now I do the reading
Yes,
twice, so
by title.
twice. So by title only, reading ordinance number 2019-015, an ordinance clarifying ordinance number 2019-014, which prohibited the establishment of certain marijuana businesses within unincorporated Deschutes County, referral to the electors, and declaring an emergency. That would be the first reading of the title. Did I just do the second right? So a second reading of ordinance number 2019-015 by title only. An ordinance clarifying ordinance number 2019-014, which prohibited the establishment of certain marijuana businesses within unincorporated Deschutes County, referral to the electors, and declaring an emergency.
At this time, I'll move adoption of ordinance number 2019-015, declaring an emergency.
No second it?
Yeah, any comments? My only two comments, hopefully nothing we've done here will undo anything we've done previously, which is what we've concluded on our own, but it's always, and the other is, it's interesting, this is in terms of ordinances, it's the next in line. There were 1 and 2, right next to each other, so nothing in between them. Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
The chair votes yes.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 4, which is consideration of chair signature of document number 2019-725, an IGA with the Oregon Health Authority. Janice Garceau is going to discuss this with us.
Good morning, Commissioners. Janice Garceau from Deschutes County Health Services, and this is indeed consideration of chair signature on an amended IGA with the Oregon Health Authority. It is amended down, unfortunately. They made an error in not removing some funds that had been moved in the previous biennium. They left that amount in the current IGA for this biennium, and it should not have been in there. So the impact to health services is $304,328 $1,000 over the 18-month biennium. I know that's a troubling thought.
A biennium.
It's kind of a biennium.
Quarters of a biennium,
Yeah.
18 months. Okay.
So the impact in year one is 202,000 roughly, and the impact in year two is 101,000. And then we're not sure what will happen with the last 6 months of the biennium. I'm not sure there's a plan yet.
Yeah, so that was one of the issues this raised, is that, was there some reason they're going to it's a state biennium budget, but they're only doing the first 18 months of it. What's, and there must be other things besides this single program that they did that on.
Well, I don't know that they're doing it with public health, and I don't know that they're doing it with IDD. It may be what I believe is part of the reason is that the CCO contracts, which fund the CMHPs, are annually renewed. So I think they may be intending to align the service element dollar budgets that support behavioral health programs through CMHPs with the CCO budget process contracts.
And then they plan to do that going forward, so they'll do that last 6 months, they'll have to cover somehow in some legislative session.
We are all waiting with bated breath to hear what the plan is.
Any questions or?
No, it's dynamic, and this is what we learn through our annual budgeting process, also watching the outcome of the state legislative session. So thank you very much for staying up on top of that, and it's a shame it is so dynamic.
Yeah, thank you.
And Janice, I did get to meet the other Alan on
Good.
Monday at the health meeting. So now I've met both of them, and he spoke for a while and talked
T-Val.
about, yes, cost containment.
Yes,
Of
his
course
vision.
Yes, his vision, cost containment, where he came from, and yes,
Yeah.
so anyway.
The other Allen meaning?
Well, there's Pat Allen is heading the OHA, but then Steve Allen is actually in one division of the OHA, but they're not related.
Okay.
But they
They're not
both-
related.
No, they're not related.
He directs all things behavioral health
Yes.
for OHA.
So, yeah, so
So one question I had is, does this affect our budget at all? I mean, did we put these things in our budget and now we have to amend our budget? And
Well,
The second one doesn't affect it because it's it's just 18 months, so we're good for now. But what about that first 200,000? Did we think we had 200,000 more than we're going to have in our
Yes.
budget?
yes, yes. It's a small enough amount relative to how large the budget is that it's likely that we're able to make adjustments and probably just through savings account for that. But yes, of course, it has an impact. It's a fairly significant amount.
What you're saying is that this is our agreement with the state agency, but
Yes.
this was incorporated in our budgeting in June for the whole this fiscal year. But it wouldn't, the second half of it we can correct because it's in another biennium or another annual budget, so.
Yeah, going into the second year of the biennium is always a little bit easier because we have more certainty about at least what the state dollars are going to be. Although, as Commissioner DeBonne references, there are many other moving parts, so
Yeah.
Dynamic.
dynamic.
Dynamic, it sounds positive.
Yeah, that's a positive word for it.
Dynamic, a good thing? Yes.
No,
Good, that's a good word. Any other questions or thoughts?
no.
Okay, let's seek a motion supporting this.
I move Chair's signature of document number 2019-725, the IGA with the Oregon Health Authority.
I'll second it.
Okay, Commissioner Adair,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, our next item is also with the Health Department is the consideration of acceptance of funding to implement the state opioid response peers pilot project.
Okay, so I believe I have talked about this a little bit with the board previously, but the state received a couple of years ago lots of federal dollars to address the opioid crisis, and that's coming to counties in lots of different ways. Apparently, when this funding was originally offered, we didn't apply, but it is now being offered to us to place peers and potentially other professionals in the ED specifically to work with people who have been recovered from opioid overdose, although they're allowing this program to address other kinds of substance use disorders or overdose conditions. So these are unspent dollars that OHA had through a SAMHSA grant to the state to address the opioid crisis, and they are offering those dollars to us and allowing us to expend them through the biennium, although all of the dollars will be distributed by the end of 2020, or by,
2021.
well, September 2020 is when they will distribute the full amount, but we are allowed to expend through June 30th of 21. And the proposal is in the grant application request, it's this document, is that we hire one peer support specialist in the adult outpatient on the team that's actually doing some integration work already with our Courtney Clinic, and that we cover some incidental costs, some indirect costs. We're only allowed a 10% amount. And then offer the other dollars in a contract to a community partner that is already doing a lot of this work with the hospital in the ED.
And who is that? Who's the?
The agency that we are hopeful we can contract with is Best Care because they're doing this now in the ED. They have a number of programs where they have folks stationed there, peers and case managers. But we're in the process, David Doyle's office hasn't seen this yet, of determining whether or not we have to do an RFP for that or not. They are currently the only providers doing this type of service in the county, but we have some steps to get through.
And when you're saying ED, that's the emergency department is at St. Charles?
Yes.
Okay, and just at the Bend St. Charles, or do they work at the?
They're working in they're working
also.
in Redmond, and they've been working for a while to expand what they can offer in Bend. And these dollars would allow us to partner in expanding an offer in the Bend Emergency Department.
And does it extend down to St. Charles's clinic in La Pine?
Well, it's very emergency department focused. So this particular grant is focused on people who have been brought to the ED because of overdose. And these are some of our highest risk, most treatment avoiding individuals. They're very hard to engage in services. They often are recovered from overdose and then leave the ED and are not seen, and often return, and on occasion don't survive their addiction. So this is really a grant that's focused on getting people with lived experience in emergency departments, trying to engage people who have otherwise been difficult to engage so that we can reach them and provide services.
Can I ask kind of a, maybe it's a dumb question, but these are tied to the state opioid response Peers Pilot Project. Not all overdoses are tied to the opioid
Correct.
crisis. So do they screen them out and say, well, you're not qualifying because it's not
No,
opioid
that was
related?
my first question, because we have probably about the same number of folks overdosing on methamphetamine
Yeah, that's,
or a combination of methamphetamine and opioids. And then we continue to have people who present to the ED with alcohol poisoning and intoxication that's extreme, and they're also at risk. So this allows us to address any population with addiction, as long as we are also addressing people with opioid overdose.
okay.
Is this a new FTE in the health department?
This would be a new FTE. So the proposal on the state's part is that they're going to amend service element. Well, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's the one that supports peers, and they will add the dollars into that service element so that there are funds available for this program.
We have the structure and some peer support specialists already
Yes.
in behavioral health. Is this kind of the same pool of people, or would this be a very different job from the peer supports that we have now?
This would be a very different setting, but the work is the same. Peers are doing outreach and engagement, coming alongside individuals, sharing their experience, trying to encourage them to have hope and to seek services. So,
And if you can increase their medical appointments to 72%, is that the goal? That was one of the evidence that it's worthwhile to have this.
yes, so the peers at the Harriman Health Center, where we have an embedded clinic, did increase by 72% people's attendance to primary care. I think this is a different population.
So it's not going to, 72 is pretty
72 would be
extremely
incredible and outstanding. If we could just enroll some of these individuals in medically assisted treatment or substance use disorder treatment, that would be enormous, because these are people who are out there not being served currently. That's who's targeted with these grant funds.
Okay, that was a forensic diversion statistic then, according to what I just read.
I think they're, in this application, it looks like they're using that as an example of how they would, the science of it, the peers themselves help. I think that's what they're doing with that.
Oh, you're talking about the evidence
Paragraph.
base for use of peers?
Number 3.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of national literature about the evidence base for using peers, but we were using some of our own internal observations of how effective the use of peers have been, both in forensic diversion and in our Harriman healthcare program.
But this, is this program expected to continue, or?
That's the rumor. So the woman who reached out to me originally, Samantha Byers at OHA, says that the belief of OHA is that there will be at least 2 more years after this biennium of funds targeting the opioid crisis. So it is possible that we may actually end up with the ability to offer this through 2023, but there are no promises.
As a follow-up to that, are you requesting a limited duration position? Or
This would be a limited duration position.
That's where I was going also.
Yes.
It could last for 2 years, it could last for 4, and well, I get the sense there's a lot of federal funding because it's become such a huge crisis in Congress. They're talking about it a lot, and
Yeah.
good. The only other question I had was, so why divide up the cost? What was there a strategy behind having one part of it come to the county and the rest go to contracts, or did somebody want us to do it that way, or?
No, nobody wanted us to do it that way. We had latitude. I think that the Best Care program has a lot of boots on the ground experience, and we want to be able to leverage that. When you're starting up a brand new offer, it could take us 6 months to be in the ED and have the relationships that Best Care already has. So this is a way for us to have a position that we support that's connected to that work without having to build the entire program. And we hope that saves time.
Do you know offhand, does somebody in this situation end up in the criminal justice system right away, or not always?
No, not always. Not always.
I would seek a motion supporting this.
I move for consideration of acceptance to implement the State Opioid Response Peers Pilot Project. Is there anything? I guess that's.
You want to
Second it, yep.
Okay.
I was just-
Any further comments?
It's nice that this money showed up, and definitely, I know we can put it to great use, because when I've been at the emergency room, they had a couple meth overdoses and a couple other issues, and they said they really need more help.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I'll kind of ditto that. When I was recently in the emergency room, there was, I asked about, who uses it, because we've been talking about this crisis center and stabilization center and all that. So, yeah, they said there was a lot of use by, the people with overdoses or substance abuse disorders. That was, they said, that was the people that were actually working there said that to me, so that's interesting. Okay, Commissioner, so I guess, Tom, you have comments?
Yeah, I think we'll need an actual finance-prepared resolution to add the FTE and the appropriation to the budget, which we could do as early as next week on consent if.
Yes. My understanding from Cheryl is that that's the plan, and we're waiting for the actual IG-8 amendment to come through. Although if you feel like the letter from the state would be adequate for a budget adjustment, we can go ahead and prepare one for next week.
I think it would, based on the
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So you're basically saying we would be approving it in form today, and then we'll do it in substance next week with the resolution and budgeting and things?
Correct.
And we're basically accepting the funding, okay. Then I think we could take the vote, understanding that, and Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Dare,
yes.
the chair votes yes.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
You.
Have a good rest of your Wednesday.
Yeah,
Thank you, Janice.
thanks. All right, looks like we're right on schedule here today, which is good. We're going to do a consideration of board signature, order number 2019-039, appeals of a hearings officer decision with Lower Bridge Road LLC planned unit. Welcome, Will.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Will Groves, Deschutes County Community Development. We have for you today multiple appeals of a hearings officer decision denying a conditional use tentative subdivision plan and surface mining impact area review. This is for a 19-lot planned unit subdivision that was going to be located 6 miles west of Terrebonne. It's on the Deschutes River on Lower Bridge Way, and it's located at a former mine site. File numbers are 405 CU, 406 TP, 407 SMA, 741A, and 757A. The present application is significantly similar to a 2015 application that was denied by the hearings officer, and that was then withdrawn by the applicant before the board. We're going to talk about the 2015 decision a couple times in here, so I want to make clear that there was a 2015 substantially similar decision, and we'll refer to the current decision that's before you as the 2019 decision. In the 2019 decision, the hearings officer denied the application, quoting extensively from the 2015 decision, and denied it because the applicant did not provide required proof that sufficient financing existed to complete the project within 4 years. And also it was denied because the applicant had requested impermissibly to defer compatibility analysis with 2 adjacent non-active surface mines. It was also appealed by Calfa Holdings LLC, who had some concerns about the use of floodplain zoned areas as open space tracts in the PUD. had concerns about the wide-reaching policy implications of this decision. Also had concerns about the minimum lot size in the floodplain zone for properties that had not received exceptions for resource uses. And finally, had some concerns with deferring compliance with rimrock setbacks. We're currently in good shape in terms of the 150-day clock. This is set to January 7th to make a decision. If we have post-hearing periods, that'll add on to that clock, so I think we've got good time here. The reasons why the board would want to hear this is that the board may want to take testimony and decide interpretive issues relating to the hearings officer's decision, and may want to reinforce or refute some of those findings or decisions. Staff believes that this is an important one for the board to hear. The board's direction on these interpretive issues have been long before us, at least since 2015 in a pointed way, but certainly in a longer term perspective. Both the applicant and the appellant want you to hear this. The reasons not to hear this are the usual ones, which is that we have a hearings officer decision that's well reasoned, and it could be supported if it was appealed to LUBA. If the board did want to hear this, we're targeting an October 30th hearing. And so at that point, I can give you some more information, answer any questions. Looking for some general direction if you'd like to hear this or not before I ask some follow-on questions.
You go down the line.
I've
Do you
been
have
through this one a
questions
little
or
bit, the
issues?
previous hearings officer decision, and so I have been in office hearing this case, kind of a big picture of this also, just acknowledging that.
Any questions specifically today, or?
Well, so yeah, some of the items I don't know that it's time to kind of ask, it is interesting, some of the different topics here. I'd support hearing it, if it's important to hear, and the fact that we could really lay out and maybe strengthen, and then the arguments that are on appeal, learn about the specific issues. So I do support that.
I have a number of questions. Go ahead. What questions do you have or comments?
I did find it fascinating that it was supposedly a hazardous waste site dump, and yet when they talked to Hanford in Washington State, they didn't show that any of the debris that was taken up there tested that way. So, I know how things are. I was reading that they had spent a lot of effort in cleaning it up. So I did appreciate that. And, I haven't actually, I drive that road all the time, so I'm not exactly sure where it is, because I'm always looking at the road, because it's curvy.
So immediately as you're headed west, immediately when you cross the bridge, the property is, as you cross the river there, the property is on your left. You see the old Roberts sign that's painted on the rock there. That's on a cliff immediately below the property. It's about 160 acres there on that bend in the river across from Bordenbeck Park.
And I've done a site tour in the past on this previous generation of this.
So as so it's everything on the west side of the river right before you cross the bridge, and then it's actually behind you too, right? It's on it's like a peninsula. It's a property. Well, there's a map in the decision, but it shows it kind of goes out to. So the river wraps around it.
Oh, is this a better?
Oh,
Those
look at
maps
that.
were not, those were a little. Okay.
So I have a kind of a variety of questions. I guess it's about a 3,000-page record, so Sharon wanted to know how much to make for all of us, and it's like, well, how about the decision and a summary? And the decision is 157 pages from the hearings officer, so I think the only thing I've been here since I've been here that's as complicated was KCDG maybe had as many issues and was as complicated. And so my first question is, how much of the hearings officer decision issues, or how many of those, would we have to reconsider, or do we just focus on the appeals? Because it goes on and on about all these ordinances, and so would that all be the scope of our hearing this, or are we going to focus on the appeals?
So the applicant has requested that you hear, and appellants have requested that you hear this matter de novo, so that anyone could speak on any topic. and you would be asked to make a broad decision on this issue. That said, of the 157 pages of the hearings officer's decision, I think less than half of that is material that you'll continue to receive testimony on. A lot of that, because of subdivision, even an uncontested subdivision pushes 75 pages. That's all just making sure the right. I think there's a limited number of issues that you're going to see fierce testimony on. I was writing the memo for your work session in advance of this hearing, and I've got about 10 issues that I brief you on. I think there's some real value in you hearing those because they are interpretive issues that you may well receive deference on before this heads on to LUBA.
So, yeah, okay, that makes sense that we wouldn't have to cover all the issues, but one of the things that concerns me is this thing that's happened to us on other appeals where, yeah, we don't hear any testimony on it here, but then it goes up to LUBA and it's raised as an issue there. And I'm not talking about this case, but other cases. So all of what we do at this level gets, could get, remanded because of three things we didn't include in the 157. So would it be just based on what's brought up by the appellant and the applicant and the parties and things, or would it be our best, your best effort at figuring out which ones could also come out, or Adams, you see what I'm asking?
That's a good question. So because this is a quasi-judicial proceeding, it's subject to the raise it or waive it. So unlike legislative procedures where at LUBA a new issue can be raised before LUBA, those issues in quasi-judicial, you have to raise them with sufficient specificity for the board to address the issue. They have to at least tell you what their issue is and give you a chance to have a discussion of it. Typically, as we frame these decisions, as the board goes forward to a decision, typically the board will adopt the hearings officer's decision with specific modifications. I expect that there would be, I'm ballparking this for probably 30 pages of new decisions, modifications, those sorts of things in your discussion that would supplement the hearings officer. That said, it's your process and it'll be focused on your level of interest.
So just context, the words you used was when it goes to LUBA, and you mentioned that also. I mean, that's a frame of mind we have. It doesn't have to be that way. It's just an opportunity for both parties, and we assume it's going to go there. I'm just saying that's just that context. Yeah.
Certainly, that's good. And it will ultimately be up to a party to appeal it to LUBA. There has been persistent interest in this. I'd be very surprised if it didn't go on. But
yeah, so I'd just like to acknowledge that. I mean, it isn't determined that it has to go there.
Well, yeah, I'm just looking kind of at the efficiency.
Yeah,
of this.
which I acknowledge it probably will. So
which leads to my next question. There's kind of two parts. One is, which items are going to go to LUBA anyway, regardless of how meaning, is it really a LUBA scope of decision? And so I was looking at what the applicant is appealing, the sufficient financing. I mean, we can say that they've covered that in whatever's been presented, but there must be some test, or I could see them taking that to LUBA with regard to what's the test of what's the sufficient financing. And then the other one, this question of, the second question the applicant appealed was the compatibility analysis, or that's what they want to, but that's what they've appealed it because the hearings officer ruled there wasn't sufficient, or they didn't do the compatibility analysis. Is that something that there would be a deference to whether we thought they had? Because I read the appeal a little bit differently than a deferral. It seemed like what the applicant had done was applied for this analysis, but it wasn't finished. It wasn't like and maybe applying for it late was deferral. But so is that something we really could determine from the facts that are presented to us?
Certainly. These are, I think overwhelmingly, these are issues that are of local code rather than state statute, so that your reasonable interpretations would receive on most of these issues deference at LUBA. Specific to, for example, I'll go into a little bit detail with the surface mining zone. There's a bit of confusion in the code when you're doing a subdivision, when you do compatibility analysis with surface mining projects. We've approached it actually over time in two different ways. One is to create the lots, and then as people come in per home site, try to verify that those lots are in fact compatible with the adjacent surface mine. The other way that we've approached it is a subdivision-wide approval, where we've said, you know, hey, you're making these lots next to the surface mine. It'd be dumb to create them if you couldn't ultimately put a house on them. Let's deal with this at the time of subdivision. And the hearings officer, I think, and this is my personal opinion, got thrown off a little bit by the fact that the applicant was arguing that they could defer this to a later stage. They, in fact, made the application, paid the fee, included the information. So I think one of the things you'll see before you is that the applicant will say, you know, we can, in fact, make this determination today, board. You know, each of these lots is compatible with the surrounding surface mining. We want you to make that finding so that it puts this issue to bed.
So are they essentially presenting some new evidence to show that they've met, that it wasn't deferred or whatever?
That's what I'd strongly anticipate.
Okay, I see. Did you have something to add on that?
Adam Smith, Assistant Legal Counsel. I agree with Will's assessment. I think looking at the entire scope of the matters raised by this appeal, there's a mix of items where you will receive deference on some and not on others. It's certainly, there are numerous items in there that are just interpretations of our code. There are other matters that are, you know, invoking state statutes, and so those that are just our code, you should get deference. The others that are invoking state statutes or are mirroring state statutes, of course, LUBA doesn't provide deference on those interpretive issues.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and so I'm kind of sizing up there's 6 issues that are kind of raised in appeal. So the first 2 were the ones the applicant was appealing. So you think both of those are kind of interpreting Deschutes County code?
I believe so.
Yes.
That's the the financing is sufficient, and
I'm not aware if those provisions in our code are mirroring other provisions in state statutes.
Those are local code. So I think you'll be telling us what that test should be. We haven't had this provision challenged previously. Usually some demonstration of financing is made.
I see.
Some basically will serve letter from somebody with a pile of money.
This case certainly starts to get into some Goal 5 issues and implicate some Goal 5 concerns. And those, once we're talking on the Goal 5 side of things, the board won't receive deference from LUBA on its interpretations of those.
Yeah, and those are in the appellants, the one on the floodplain zone, whether that can be part of an open space tract, that, and then there's the minimum lot size thing, and so some of the things the appellant has raised would be more, I refer to them as things that would be decided at LUBA if they want to decide them there, regardless of what we said.
That I think is, I mean, you won't receive deference, but I think certainly the county commissioner's decision and analysis of the issues sets the stage for how those matters continue on to LUBA. And I will also note, I mean, just to parrot some of the other comments, right, this controversy, or this case touches directly a controversy that's been alive and well in Deschutes County now for several years. We had a very consistent perspective on how to treat floodplain and acreage limits and all these different things that filter from that for years, and there are numerous hearing officers' decisions that kind of confirmed that perspective. More recently, there was one decision that took us into another direction, and ever since that decision came out, this question has been unanswered in Deschutes County. And we've tried numerous different times, numerous different ways to try and get at this issue. It's just, I mean, this quasi-judicial matter is now taking the forefront, and is from a timing perspective, it leading the charge on answering this particular question. So,
well, yeah, and, you know, on that, I mean, it bothers me to see that our withdrawing of the floodplain amendments is now used against us or used as proof of an intent by the county. And it makes me wish we'd just gone forward with the floodplain amendments, because there was agreement we needed it, or that we want with the direction, and we pulled it back because we didn't do the easy, and they've got that in here too, saying that, so, it's been a learning process to me that when you pull back something you're doing, then it becomes argued in the next quasi-judicial matter. So
we're
it's
overstating the case. I don't think we withdrew the amendment. We paused the amendment.
Well, we didn't go. Yeah, so maybe I was just reading what they said, but yeah, we paused, but it makes me want to go forward just as an aside, because the intent is from what little I read, I mean, it seemed like our intent was being interpreted different than I intended. So that was interesting.
Had a similar reaction.
Yeah, so that was interesting. But,
Well,
okay, well, those are kind of my,
In context of time with this application and knowing that, floodplain amendment, if you see it over time, you see the interrelation, and it is hard to understand. This application specifically
yeah, but what
had an
what they
interrelationship
do-
with our legislative process.
But they bring it up, I think it was the appellant saying, because we withdrew, or paused it, that intended something, and we had decided what we were doing, and we paused it because
yeah.
of the easy.
I'm just saying, since I've seen the cycle once or twice, there's a bigger picture.
Page 89 of our packet has an error. It said it was deemed complete by the planning department, and you have June 15th, 2018. Isn't that supposed to be 19?
Yes, that should. I'll check that.
Okay.
Well, I guess, yeah, so my question is just kind of looking at, I think this will be a difficult hearing to have, so I didn't want to necessarily, I wasn't encouraged to do it if it was all going to be decided at LUBA eventually anyway. I mean, it could just go there now, but it sounds like if the parties want us to hear it, I'm fine hearing it, and so I guess that's kind of how I feel about this. What's your thought? Are you
I
interested
support
in
hearing
hearing it, or? Commissioner Dare?
It's fascinating reading. No, I mean, it is,
It
because
is,
you
yeah.
think about the history and you read what was happening, before there were any rules, and then what they've done to clean it up, and that there's still an issue. No, I think it's, if we need to hear it, I think it's important, because we possibly could bring some clarity.
So then it sounds like we all agree that we'd hear it, and there's a consensus on that, so I guess we just need a motion adopting, are they both numbered this?
They're numbered the same. They're alternative versions.
Okay.
To hear or to deny to hear, decline to hear.
So we would be, we'd have board signature of order number 2019-039, indicating we would hear this matter.
Do you want me to make it?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, go ahead
Okay,
and make
so
the
we need,
motion.
I would like to make the motion of board signature on order number 2019-039, appeals of the hearing officer decision, Lower Bridge Road, LLC, Plan Unit Development.
And I'll second it.
Okay, any further comments? Okay, Commissioner Dare,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
Thank you. And I have two additional questions for you. One is, if you'd like to do a site visit, I know that Commissioner DeBonne, we did one of those back in the day, and the property, I think there's some benefit to either seeing the site from above up on Teeter Road or arranging with the applicant for a walk about the property. It's really something to see.
I would be interested in a site visit. I also, it's my understanding that some of the opposition is neighbors across the river or something. I'm kind of interested in seeing that as part of the site visits, what the neighboring property is, because I don't know what these other two that have the surface mining, whether that's relevant, but it seems like the opposition that isn't just, we don't want any development on the river, but it's, we don't want this development, has to do with how it fits in. So I think that's kind of relevant to maybe to some of the arguments or the appeals.
And some of the work that's been done, I don't know, Commissioner DeBonne, when you went, but it really sounds like it's something that we should see in today's world, because, you clearly see on your map that you gave us, it still is white in part, and I know they were talking about the dust factor and, mitigating the dust with the sprinkling system, so, anyway, because apparently that's an issue.
Yeah, and this was what I was trying to explain to you, is this, it sticks out like a peninsula or something, so that's why I think it's relevant what's across the river. And I wasn't aware of the, is it the Redmond Park District that has?
Yeah, Bordenbeck
Yes.
Park is, they have a little land there on the east side of the river immediately before the bridge.
Oh, okay, I know what you mean. Huh.
And it is in Redmond Fire,
Yes.
okay.
And they had things they wanted to
So I think it's a choice of individual tours or a joint tour, because I'd be available for a tour, and even if we all go, that may be valuable. It'd be well-documented public meeting,
Yeah.
or individual tours.
Whatever works.
Are we okay doing a joint tour?
Sure, we typically let folks know, so they have an ability to be present, not participate in any subjective, substantive way, but to at least be there and warn you not to step on that rock or watch out for that cliff or things like that. Not to lobby their case. And
Okay.
Of course, the purpose of those site visits is for you to observe the circumstances. I mean, we'll work with the parties to make sure nobody is lobbying for one position or another. It's, they're kind of awkward because they're very silent site visits.
Well, yeah. There's
I did an
informative
individual
things.
tour in the past, so, so that's kind of a choice or a decision if we would want to do a joint.
I think and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the reason why individual tours are generally chosen is sometimes the landowner is hesitant to have the public for insurance reasons on their property. And so when the board goes as a group, then the public needs to be attending, then the public needs to be on this old mine site, which isn't entirely safe for people to roam about unsupervised. And so I think that's how we chose to do individual visits last time, but if those constraints remain, those would be considerations.
Good
Well,
to-
why don't we just leave that up to you if you can get them set up individually? It also causes the landowners to have to be there, however many times as opposed to once. But, to me, it's all really seeing the scope of the area and the topography and it's all kind of geology and
Yep.
geography.
I'd be available
So-
either way, is what.
Okay.
So,
And then as a final question, this hearing, there were a lot of people interested in it. At previous hearings, you've set limits on testimony, that you've set ranges between 20 and 90 minutes for applicant and appellant presentations, and as little as 3 minutes for all other parties. In this case, I did talk to the applicant, and they were hoping for at least 30 minutes plus 10 minutes for rebuttal. If that's acceptable to you, I'll include that in the notice and also let the appellant have a matching amount of time associated with that.
was this one, I mean, I couldn't tell, it looked like quite a few people had offered testimony at the hearings officer. How long did that hearing run?
Well, that went several hours.
So is this something we should have not during the middle of a normal business meeting day?
Your options are either to constrain testimony or to have it in some time where you're not as time constrained, I think.
Well, I don't know how many people support the applicant, but there's then all the people that showed up at the hearings officer. Why wouldn't they show up at this hearing too? So what do you think, Tom?
Commissioners, right now, you do have one other public hearing scheduled for that day on some housekeeping legislative amendments, but I believe that's the only thing. You could also consider, perhaps an earlier start than your normal 10 a.m. to allow plenty of time to get through this.
We've got the Cova breakfast.
Yeah, the Covo breakfast is that morning
What time
at 7 or
is that?
something. It's early,
It's early, yeah.
but it's not, I think it's like till 9.
So you're looking at the 30th of October, that's 2 weeks from today.
That was the first available date we could conduct it. Certainly, later dates would be possible.
So having it start like at 1, that's not enough time in the afternoon then?
It could be. I mean, we can do the rest of our meeting. Do you know what our other matter is?
It's a public hearing on some changes resulting from the last legislative session.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know the extent of those, but they're.
We went through those in work session, I think, yeah. So that, we could probably do that in the morning, possibly, if we wanted to do this in the afternoon. That's a good suggestion, I think, to start this in the afternoon, so we have a defined time, and we got 4 hours before 5 o'clock.
We can.
And if it goes
till
till 6, we can handle it.
We can do that, too.
Yes.
So something to consider with the time limits, and I'll be looking for some direction on that, is that there are a number of represented parties who are not appellants. So in past practice, you've afforded extra time to the applicant and to people who filed an appeal, and in this case, the applicant is an appellant as well as Calfa Holdings LLC. There are a number of other represented parties, parties represented by Liz Dixon, also parties represented by Landwatch. And so if we limit all other parties to 3 minutes or some other shorter time, there may be some concerns in that regard, but we don't have an approach to, I think that there's a good reason to treat the applicant and appellant differently. They paid their money. They're the appellants of this application. The other ones, I don't know what time limit you want to make available for them, or if you want to differentiate represented and non-represented parties.
That would be difficult to, that would be difficult. That would be something I would want to look into if we can limit timeframes from non-represented parties and others. I'm not sure that that would be very prudent.
Well, what, so who is Calfa Holdings? Is that a property owner or is that?
Adjacent property owner.
Okay, okay. So then, and then I saw some reference to the Friends of Lower Bridge and since Oregon Land Watch we're familiar with. It seems to me we'd want to hear what they have to say because they've a lot, they've already probably have a lot to say. So you're saying if we gave them 5 or 10 minutes, then everybody gets 5 or 10 minutes, which, were there a lot of individuals in the hearings officer? I mean, I don't know how many neighbors there are, or how many.
I think we ended up having about a dozen people present, and it wasn't 100.
I mean, we've had ones where we have 30, individuals that testify and stuff, so that's.
I'd support 5 minutes for all other testimony. And in my experience is 3 minutes, you can really get a story out. 5 minutes is that little bit longer period with written backup if somebody needs it. So 5 minutes is a little bit more and that would be for everybody, so I would support that.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the 5 minutes for everybody. I hope that's enough for the other represented parties, because we might as well hear it now if we're gonna hear it, so.
Well, and there's a lot of record on this. So,
We'll divide it up.
5
You do
minutes
the
is-
first 1,000 and I'll do
Yeah,
the
there.
second 1,000, you do the third.
But 5 minutes is the way to say, okay, this is from previous testimony, this is what matters, or this is what's different from previous testimony. 'Cause those would be the ways that people could go.
Yeah. Any thoughts on the 5 minutes?
It sounds only fair.
Okay.
All right, so
we're
I'll send the
supporting
notice with 30 minutes for the appellant and applicant, 5 minutes for all other parties, and I'll leave a 10-minute for rebuttal for the applicant that they're afforded.
Okay, if that's sufficient, I have no idea.
Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Will.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Will. All right, so our final matter for this morning is discussion of a consideration of a limited duration permit technician in CDD.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Sherry Penner with Community Development, and with me I have Angela Havenar. She is our Coordinated Services Administrative Manager. We come before you today to ask for one limited duration permit technician in an effort to plan for succession retirements that are going to occur in October of 2020. We have received a letter of intended retirement. Our permit technician positions take a good 6 to 12 months to train, sometimes a little bit longer, and so we thought if we could go ahead and get started, we'd be very much appreciate that. We have, in addition to the retirement in 2020, we have another 30-year term staff who will retire in March of 21.
Wow.
It isn't one thing, it's another, huh? That's interesting.
No, I think it's really good to
Yeah.
actually to read this and hear it, because I heard about like someone from like the Soils and Water had something that they could normally in the past just take in and be stamped and get done with it, like cleaning a ditch, and it was in our office for 4 months because we lost some of the people that have the historical knowledge. And so we really need to transfer that historical knowledge from anybody that's been here for 30 years, and starting now is a great idea. So thank you for thinking ahead.
Thank you.
So my understanding is that the reason this came up as opposed to just you hiring a short-term person is that it's kind of unusual to do a limited duration for a year. Would this person be, I mean, whoever you hire for this, I would assume the reason you're going to train them is you want them to be full-time at the end of that year. Is there why not do it for 6 months, and if it's working well, make it permanent then? I mean,
Well, the
are we
idea.
going to know something a year from now that we don't know 6 months from now?
No, I think the idea was that it takes a very long time to learn all the intricacies of all the various divisions that the permit technicians work with. Our intent would be that this limited duration position would be eliminated when the retirement occurs. The person that's in the limited duration position would slide into that FTE for the person that's retiring. So it would be a limited duration for
Adding
12,
another one.
12 months or less, at your discretion.
Trying to prevent the gap for customers.
No, I get that, but I'm assuming once you have somebody you like, and if it's working out, they're going to fill the position. So you're saying we'd have to create a new FTE, and then 6 months later, we'd have an opening, and your intent isn't to fill that opening, it's just, but maybe you need another permit technician. Is 8 enough? I mean, I'm not trying to.
That is a loaded question.
So,
That is
are you the right people we should ask? Should we ask the yeah.
Please.
Go ahead.
We do feel like with the 2 pending retirements over the next 12 to 18 months, that it would benefit us greatly to get 2 new people in and get them trained. It does seem like a very long period of time, but there are a lot of details that come and go with all the various permits and the requirements and the legal requirements that they need to understand. So we would greatly appreciate 2 limited durations, and even more so would appreciate 1.
This is the time of year to hopefully bring somebody on, get them up to speed. People in the winter will get real excited about what they're going to do in the spring, so that's when the activity will real start again.
Our hope to use this winter season for training.
Yeah.
So next summer, we don't miss a beat with customer service. We can hit the ground running.
I think the other benefit that we might add is we've just recently, like 2 weeks ago, hired our latest permit technician. If we could get all 3 on the same training program, it would be much more efficient for the trainer, much more efficient, I think, for them to learn as a group.
And so you know as well, we've looked at the way we're training. We have started implementing a new training process that we're hoping will be efficient to maybe shorten that duration a little bit. Well, this person we just hired in October is the first one we're trying this with. But if we could train them all 3 at the same time, I think the efficiency would be amazing.
3 being 1 you just
2 for
hired
sure.
and 2 more, because I think we were thinking about 1 more.
Yeah.
I just brought up 2 more, but
One more
One
would be
more.
great.
I don't know that we were going to do 2 today. But for me personally, I could see maybe in 6 months you adding another one, but it doesn't help your training, but it helps fill your gaps if you know there's these.
Well, we already had a problem with overtime payment of 40 hours per month, according to this, since January.
Is that one
So
of the charts? Where's that?
no, that's at the last page. So that's a significant number, 40 hours of overtime. So we really, you know what, we need to get ahead. And especially, it's interesting then the counter people, that number is also going up to 70. So, you know, those are the kind of, we want to be customer service, and we want we want people to always say, oh my gosh, loved it the other day talking to someone that did a huge business in in Redmond. And she said, oh, working with the county was always so good. So, it makes you really.
Was that me?
No, that was the trailer company.
'Cause
The trailer
I
co-
have said that as a
Yeah.
builder, I always thought.
Yeah, she said it. She goes, it was so nice working with the county. And I thought, that's because you guys smile, and you always try and help people. So.
It's also interesting, I think, with our satellite offices, we really do have 2 fully trained permit technicians to help manage those, as well as come back to the main office and help and assist with training we've got a fairly young staff as far as their term with us.
Did you have any comments, Nick?
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to say that your comment about 2 limited duration is exactly our proposal for next spring, is to bring back another request for when we get the next letter for the year or so retirement letter that we'll count on for March-ish of 2021. Next spring, we would request another limited duration to begin that position between 9 and 12 months before. For example, this process, starting, if the person could start in December, it won't be quite the full year overlap or the full year training program. It's probably closer to 10 months. And the other thing I was just going to mention is the hiring pool that Angie just executed for the person we just hired. It was probably our best pool of candidates we've ever had. We had 3 outstanding candidates. So if the board is inclined to approve one of the limited duration today, she's able to proceed immediately, of course, pending board final
Got a
approval.
short list already.
Which is really great. It really expedites that process.
Okay. I guess, the only comment I made about, well, it takes a long time to train people. Well, it does in all our departments. I mean, everybody takes a long time to get up to training, and I would think.
Mr. Chairman, I think you're right. The difference that we have, for example, in our department is for planners, we would never ask for that, even maybe a 3 or 4 month time frame, because planners they have planning background, often they have planning experience, and they're going into a planning position. And with building, they have building certifications, and maybe they need a couple of more certifications, and it's similar. And environmental soils, they have to have their environmental soil certifications as well. With permit technicians, we often have people that have extraordinary customer service experiences and maybe some limited construction background, but very, very rarely are they versed in any one of our disciplines in any detail. And it just takes a long time to train them across all of our programs and to have a good level of experience across all. So we wouldn't ask for that type of an overlap or limited duration, or even probably half that time for any other position in our department. So hence, permit technicians are very unique for Deschutes County. A lot of other counties, permit technicians will only work for a building division or only a planning division or something of that nature, whereas for us, we cross-train them across all divisions, and they provide really exceptional services to our customers at the counter because they are well-versed in.
You're saying there's a real difference between a subdivision planning or something
Exactly.
versus a building of a garage or a house or something.
They need to know everything from the basics of a solar setback to a regular setback to where you can site a septic system to, and then, of course, building is their primary area of expertise, but they really need at least a foundation of what they're of how they need to guide our customers when they walk in the door from the very beginning of the process.
Tom, did you have any comments or thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. And I'm supportive of CDD's request. I know from personal experience it does take that long to fully train a permit tech, depending on their level of experience and aptitude coming in. But this is, frankly, much longer than we would do in other circumstances. I not infrequently approve a 3 or 4 month overlap administratively in many other county departments to allow for a smoother transition. This is much longer, so I wanted to make sure that the Board of Commissioners was comfortable with this also, because we need to kind of draw a box around this one based on the unique circumstances. So, I think, based on my conversations with Nick and staff, that they can probably absorb the cost of one. As you know, the CDD is fee supported, so adding 2 may require some more analysis on where the money would come from to fund that for a full couple of years. Not impossible, but it may require some kind of special maneuvering. So, but I think with one, they ought to be able to absorb the additional cost of a permit tech for this fiscal year, and if necessary, they may have to come back at the end of the year to shore that up a little bit. But those are my comments.
And I do see on your charts here that actually your total number of permits went down, or didn't go up very much, and the total counter customers went down between the last 2 fiscal years, a little bit. So we're not, and that's what you hear is, well, things are slowing. I don't know if it's going to, I don't know what's going to.
No, according to this, CDD had 59 during 18, 19, but 19 was averaging over 70.
Well, I'm looking at the chart here, total counter customers. The chart is going down in 19 versus 18.
I think part of that reflection would also be the online permits that we've started in that.
Well, it's going down too, though.
And phone calls.
Total online goes down low. Anyway, it's kind of flattening, whatever.
It is,
Yeah,
I would agree with you.
steady.
We're experiencing some stabilization.
So what
But
do you?
then again, the volume, the dollar amount.
I know.
So, I mean, there's a
Still-
future.
Got it, but
there's a
septic
future in
isn't a
this.
very big,
The dollar
Part of-
amount.
but it isn't a very big part of permit. Oh, you're saying,
I'm just saying, the future,
that shows
that's
what's coming.
previous. Yeah, that's.
But the dollar amount of the projects is up there, is what I've been noticing. That isn't that, yes, the valuation is, so
plan
people
from a
are doing
planning
bigger projects.
so what's your,
Oh, I'm supportive, yeah.
of
Getting
one.
the cohort, getting the cohort going, getting folks up to speed.
I think what Tom, you're bringing up really is the fact that we have X number of departments, they all have reasons that they want to do, and so we don't, every time we do something in one department, it gets looked at, and they say, well, what about CDD? They did this, and so can't we do this in the road department? Because it's really, I think that's really your concern, is we don't want to start a policy of limited duration one year, you know, where we're really hiring a full-time person. There's no other category we have, right? We just have limited duration or full-time.
Well, we have part-time and seasonal, but those don't really fit in this particular case. I think that the limited duration is a real clean way of ensuring that this is tied to that retirement, and that when the retirement occurs, the limited duration becomes permanent by sliding into that FTE slot. And if for whatever reason the person changes their mind on retirement, which has happened occasionally, then we would have to, you know, deal with it at that point, whether, you know, resubmit for an additional length of time or convert it, depending on business volume at that time, to a one truly additional FTE, but that would come at that time. So generally, we do require a written notice of retirement as sort of some, you know, more solid documentation of the fact that this is a discrete point in time. But even that's not, nobody's legally held to that if they change their mind towards the end. But usually when they're putting it in writing, they're pretty set for that date.
Well, and if they're up to the 30-year and things like that, is, but just so you know, the departments have 30-year people too that, you know, this, I just don't want to, because really what we're doing is we're adding another person for a year. I mean, because you're going to get value out of this person before the other person retires. So we're upping our staffing, and
But then again,
despite it being a training period, the other thing we normally would do is we'd replace the person when they leave and the training starts. So.
and that's what I heard from the story that I said originally. People would walk in there and have to wait 4 months, something that could have been stamped on the counter. So we've lost that in the past. So I'm personally really happy, because you're talking about preparing for the future. The 4 staff will have a, 2.8 years experience. After we lose those 2 people, I mean, nobody else will have the depth of knowledge, and that takes a little while to filter that. So, I mean, I think what you're doing is excellent.
Let's, so do we need a motion, or is this guidance, so you come back with a?
I think if just a motion of approval is sufficient at this point. We're not adjusting their budget other than providing the authority to add the limited duration FTE. There's no appropriation moving at this point.
I'll move approval or support for limited duration permit technician for Community Development Department.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any other comments? Just don't tell any of the departments. Okay, and I'll, so Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Adair?
Of course, yes.
And the chair will vote yes.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, wipe that tape out, right?
Oh, yeah.
Just kidding.
Everybody knows.
Yeah, Nick always gets what he wants or something. I don't know.
That's because he works so hard. Thank you, guys. Thanks for thinking ahead.
Well, I think that brings us to our lunch recess. We're doing pretty well. Looks like really right on time, more or less. So I guess we'll reconvene at 1 o'clock. That seems like it'd be work for us. 45
Upstairs?
minutes. Yeah, I think in the Allen room
And work session items at that point.
for a couple of work session items. Yep, exactly. So